The CEO pretended to be a delivery driver, then heard his employees mock a single mother. Ethan Cole had built SwiftBite into one of the fastest-growing delivery platforms in America. But on a rainy Tuesday night in Seattle, he could not figure out how to wear the delivery bag. He stood in the parking lot behind a high-end sushi restaurant, wearing a SwiftBite driver jacket, a baseball cap pulled low, and sneakers that were far too clean to belong to anyone who had ever sprinted through apartment rain puddles with miso soup. The insulated delivery bag hung sideways across his chest like it was trying to escape. Luis Martinez, a 52-year-old driver with a gray beard, sharp eye, and the calm of a man who had survived both Seattle traffic and rich people's delivery. Instructions stared at him from beneath the restaurant awning. "You look," Luis said, "like a rich man cosplaying stress." Ethan adjusted the cap. "I'm trying to blend in." "With who?" "A golf sponsor having a breakdown." Ethan looked down at the driver app on his phone. He had designed the system, approved its newest interface, and reviewed 100 dashboards about driver efficiency. He had never actually used it to pick up an order. The screen asked him to confirm pickup. He tapped the wrong thing. The app opened a map. He tapped again. It offered him a support chatbot. Luis sighed as if witnessing a crime. "You're new. I understand the platform. Buddy, the platform does not understand you." Ethan nearly dropped 3 boxes of premium sushi when the restaurant host placed them on the counter. He caught 2 against his chest and trapped the third awkwardly under his elbow. Luis took 1 box before tragedy reached the wasabi. "First rule," Luis said. "Food goes in the bag, not against your soul." Ethan forced a smile. This undercover shift had been his idea. Madison Reed, SwiftBite's operations director, had called the complaints isolated friction points. Drivers being blamed for late orders when restaurants delayed food, customers insulting them through the app, internal employees referring to them as low-tier contractors in messages that should never have existed. Madison had said the company was scaling too fast for emotional overreaction. Ethan had said nothing then. But tonight he was here as Eli, a new delivery driver with no last name worth noticing. Or at least that had been the plan before his delivery bag betrayed him. A woman hurried into the pickup area, rain glistening on the shoulders of her jacket. Her hair was tied in a messy knot, and she was speaking into one earbud with the brisk tenderness of a mother holding a household together by voice command. "Yes, Oliver, teeth first. Dinosaur pajamas second. No, brushing one tooth does not count as teamwork." She scanned the pickup shelf, checked the order number, then glanced at Ethan. Her eyes moved from his sideways delivery bag to his 2 clean shoes. "You're either new," she said, "or your backpack is trying to escape." Luis made a sound that might have been a cough and might have been joy. Ethan looked down. "It's more complicated than it appears. It's a bag, not a custody agreement." She stepped closer, turned the strap, tightened the buckle, and adjusted the weight so it sat properly across his shoulders. Her hands were quick, practical, and completely unimpressed by him. "There," she said. "Now you look like you might survive an elevator." "Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Elevators smell fear." Her name on the app was Rachel Q. Ethan knew the profile. High acceptance rate, excellent customer ratings, frequent evening shifts. Often active after 7 p.m. He had seen numbers beside her name. Now he saw the person. Wet sleeves, tired eyes, dry humor sharp enough to cut through the rain. Rachel assumed he was just a new driver named Eli. She taught him the basics while they waited for their next orders. Always photograph the apartment number clearly. Never trust luxury building elevators after 9 p.m. If a customer wrote, "I'll tip later," she said, he should treat it as a philosophical statement about human disappointment. Ethan laughed before he could stop himself. Rachel's phone rang. Her face changed when she saw the name. "Derek," she answered while checking sauce containers. Her ex-husband's voice was loud enough for Ethan to catch fragments. "Commission delayed, tough month. He would make up the child support soon." She always made it sound like he was doing this on purpose. Rachel's jaw tightened. She did not yell. That seemed harder. She only said Oliver still needed shoes for school, groceries were not theoretical, and soon was not a payment method. When she ended the call, she looked at Ethan as if daring him to pity her. He wisely said nothing. A moment later, her phone lit up again with a video call. Oliver appeared on the screen in dinosaur pajamas, hair damp from a bath and face serious with bedtime authority. "I did homework," he announced. "I am now assistant logistics manager." Rachel smiled. "Congratulations." Did the assistant logistics manager brush all his teeth? Most departments reported success. Ethan had to look away to hide a smile. Then Oliver asked if she would be home before he slept. Rachel's smile held, but something behind it bent. "Maybe, baby." It was a gentle lie. Ethan recognized it only because he had built entire companies out of more expensive versions. Their phones pinged at the same time. Shared pickup. Shared destination. Rachel glanced at the address and groaned. SwiftBite headquarters. Ethan's stomach dropped. Of course. The night had a sense of humor. They loaded the sushi into their bags and drove through rain-glossed streets toward the glass tower Ethan owned. designed, and rarely entered through anything but the front doors. Rachel parked near the curb. Ethan instinctively looked toward the main lobby. All warm lighting and polished stone. Rachel laughed without humor. Not that way. The security guard at the front entrance saw their jackets and pointed toward the side alley before they even reached the door. Deliveries used the rear entrance, past the dumpsters, past stacked cardboard, past the loading dock where the rain collected in black puddles. Rachel walked like she had done it 100 times. Ethan followed, his throat tightening. "This building has a public lobby," he said. "For people," Rachel replied. "Food people go where they keep trash and broken office chairs." She said it lightly. That made it worse. At the rear door, security checked their app codes without looking at their faces. Ethan wanted to say his own name. He wanted to ask who had written this policy, who had approved it, whether Madison knew. Then he realized he probably had approved it in a facilities memo he never read beyond cost savings. Traffic flow. Inside the freight elevator, the air smelled like cardboard, rainwater, and old coffee. Rachel pulled a granola bar from her pocket and broke it in half. "You look pale, Eli. I'm fine." Dangerous words. She handed him the half. "First rule of delivery. Feed yourself before rich people complain their soup is emotionally delayed." Ethan laughed. For a second, the sound was real. Then the elevator doors opened onto the executive floor of SwiftBite. Glass walls, soft carpet, late-night conference rooms glowing with expensive light. Ethan stepped out beside Rachel, carrying sushi for the people who worked for him. And for the first time since founding SwiftBite, he understood what it felt like to enter his own company as someone invisible. The executive floor of SwiftBite looked nothing like the back entrance. There were no puddles here, no dumpsters, no cardboard stacked beside a leaking pipe. The hallway smelled faintly of cedar, espresso, and expensive cleaning products. Framed posters lined the walls with slogans Ethan himself had approved. Delivering connection, one meal at a time, people first, always. Rachel walked past them without looking. Ethan did look. For the first time, the words felt less like values and more like decorations no one had been asked to prove. The order was for Conference Room A, where a late strategy meeting was still running. Through the glass wall, Ethan recognized several faces immediately. Product leads, growth managers, 2 people from driver operations. Madison Reed at the far end of the table, arms folded, listening with the calm focus that had made her valuable and dangerous. Ethan lowered his cap. Rachel balanced the sushi bags against one hip and knocked lightly. No one answered. She opened the door anyway, wearing the expression of someone who had delivered to enough offices to understand that hunger made executives temporarily deaf. The room barely paused. One employee pointed to a side counter without looking up from his laptop. Another waved vaguely, as if the food had appeared by weather pattern. Rachel began unloading the order carefully. Ethan followed her lead, setting down trays, sauces, chopsticks, napkins. He kept his face angled away, but his ears caught everything. A young manager picked up a container and frowned. The spicy mayo shifted. Rachel looked at the sealed bag. The container's closed. It's tilted. It had a journey. Someone laughed, not kindly. Another employee muttered that drivers always had an excuse. Traffic, rain, restaurant delay, kids, phones dying, sick parents. There was always a story. Then came the sentence that made Ethan's hands go still, especially the single moms doing night shifts. Every one of them comes with a documentary. A few people chuckled. Rachel's face did not change. That was what bothered Ethan most, not the insult. The fact that she had clearly heard worse and learned to keep standing. He recognized the speaker, Kyle from Driver Experience. Kyle had presented a deck 2 weeks earlier called Restoring Dignity Across the Delivery Journey. Ethan remembered approving budget for that initiative. Kyle now popped open soy sauce with one hand and continued like he was performing for the room. The platform, he said, had become too soft. Drivers wanted flexibility but complained when flexibility looked like uncertainty. They wanted tips, sympathy, second chances, special exceptions. If someone could not handle deliveries after bedtime, maybe they should not take the shift. Madison did not join in, but she smiled faintly, the kind of smile that allowed cruelty to stay casual. Ethan felt heat rise behind his eyes. He nearly reached for his cap. One motion and the room would change. One name spoken and Kyle's face would collapse. Madison would sit straighter. Every person at the table would discover dignity by emergency. His fingers touched the brim. Rachel's hand brushed his wrist. Not dramatic. Barely visible, but clear. Don't. Ethan looked at her. Her eyes told him more than the word could have. Not here. Not like this. Not for me. Before he could decide whether he was capable of restraint, one of the women near the screen squinted at Rachel. "Wait," she said. "You delivered last week, right?" Rachel closed the empty thermal bag. "Probably." "Oh, it's the tired mom again." The room laughed. A man near the window leaned back. "Where's the kid tonight?" "Sleeping in the car." Something in Ethan cracked. Rachel inhaled once. Then she turned toward the table. Her voice was calm, which somehow made it sharper. "If you can build $1 million app that gets ramen to this floor at 10 at night," she said, You can probably learn how to say thank you to the person who brought it up." The laughter died immediately. No one knew what to do with a driver who did not shout, did not apologize, did not smile to make them comfortable. Rachel picked up her bag. "Enjoy your emotionally stable sushi." Then she walked out. Ethan followed, every muscle in his body demanding he turn back. The door clicked shut behind them. In the hallway, the glass walls reflected him, cap low, jacket damp, jaw clenched. For the first time in his own headquarters, he looked like a man trying not to explode inside a costume he deserved. "I'm going back," he said. Rachel kept walking. "No, you're not. They can't talk to you like that. They already did. That makes it worse. That makes it Tuesday." The freight elevator opened. She stepped inside. He followed because he had not yet earned the right to do anything else. As the doors closed, Ethan hit the wrong button, then another, then the open door button by accident. The elevator sat there, doors politely refusing to participate in his rage. Rachel watched him with one eyebrow raised. "You trying to fight the panel? The panel is poorly designed. Of course you'd blame infrastructure." He stared at the buttons, then at her. Despite everything, she almost smiled. He did not, he was too angry, but the anger had begun to change shape. Rachel leaned against the elevator wall, arms folded around the delivery bag. Her face was tired now, the armor lowering by inches. "You going back in there only makes them remember your temper," she said. "Not my dignity." Ethan had no answer. She continued, quieter. "I have 3 more deliveries. I have to get home before Oliver fully convinces my neighbor that dinosaurs require bedtime snacks. I don't need a hallway revolution from a guy I met 2 hours ago." That sentence stopped him. A guy I met 2 hours ago. To her, he was still Eli. A clumsy new driver with clean shoes and suspicious anger. And even as Eli, he had almost made her humiliation about his reaction. The elevator descended. Rachel checked her phone, confirmed the next order, and squared her shoulders again before the doors opened at the loading dock. By the time Ethan got home, rain had washed the city into dark glass. He did not sleep. He sat in his private office overlooking Seattle and opened files he had skimmed for months. Driver complaint rates, late delivery penalties, account deactivation appeals, customer abuse reports, internal chat logs, support ticket keywords, earnings volatility after app updates. Then he searched the phrase he had heard in the conference room. Low-tier contractors. It appeared more than once. Not everywhere, not officially. That made it worse. Cruelty did not need to be policy when culture gave it a place to sit. Near dawn, Ethan opened the recording from conference room A. The words sounded even uglier without the noise of the room around them. SwiftBite sold connection, convenience, human warmth delivered to doorsteps. But the people carrying that warmth through rain, traffic, elevators, locked lobbies, and executive contempt had been treated as replaceable costs in reflective jackets. Ethan thought of Rachel handing him half a granola bar in the freight elevator. Of her face when they called her the tired mom again. Of the way she stopped him from rescuing her, because she knew rescue could become another kind of spectacle. For the first time, Ethan did not ask what the dashboard said. He asked who had been made invisible so the numbers could look good. Ethan told himself he stayed undercover because the investigation required more evidence. That was only partly true. The other part had Rachel Quinn's laugh in it. For the next several nights he kept working as Ellie, the suspiciously clean new SwiftBite driver who still handled delivery bags like they might file complaints against him. Luis noticed immediately. No real new driver returned voluntarily after being chased by a customer's golden retriever through a gated yard, dropping a container of truffle fries and apologizing to the dog. Luis watched Ethan wipe mud off his shoes behind a Thai restaurant and shook his head. A normal man would quit. "I'm committed to learning." No, you're committed to something. Learning doesn't make people stare at single mothers like their tax deductions with beautiful eyes. Ethan nearly dropped his phone. Luis only grinned and walked away. Rachel, fortunately, was too busy surviving the night shift to notice everything. She taught Ethan how to keep pizza level while driving through potholes, which he failed so dramatically that the cheese slid into one corner like it was evacuating. She showed him how to read customer instructions with the suspicion of a detective. "Leave it blue door," one customer wrote. The apartment complex had 5 blue doors. Rachel stood in the rain, hands on hips, and said that somewhere in Seattle, a landlord had chosen chaos as a paint scheme. Another night, a customer insisted the order be delivered to the side entrance. There were 3 side entrances, 1 locked gate, and a motion sensor sprinkler that activated directly onto Ethan's pants. Rachel laughed so hard she had to lean against her car. He should have been embarrassed. He was. But he also liked making her laugh. Rachel laughed carefully, as if joy were something she could only afford in short shifts. When she did, her whole face changed. The tiredness did not disappear, but it loosened its grip. Between orders she talked more. Not in one long confession. Rachel did not confess. She released truths in small pieces, the way a person fed coins into a meter and hoped time would not run out. She taught preschool during the day. mostly 4-year-olds, which she described as tiny philosophers with glue access. She had once studied special education before marriage, bills, divorce, and motherhood rearranged her plans. Delivery work let her choose late hours after Oliver fell asleep, but flexibility had teeth. No paid sick days, no real protection when customers lied, no insurance through the app, no way to explain to an algorithm that a restaurant took 20 minutes too long, or that a neighborhood felt unsafe, or that a child's fever mattered more than completion rate. Ethan listened, and every sentence opened a crack between SwiftBite's marketing language and the ground people actually stood on. At headquarters, Madison defended the numbers. Driver penalties reduced cancellation abuse. Automated deactivation kept the platform efficient. Independent contractor status preserved flexibility. Customer satisfaction had risen since the stricter performance model launched. Ethan asked how many appeals were denied without human review. Madison had the figure ready. That was what unsettled him. She had every figure ready except the one that measured dignity. He dug deeper at night after deliveries. Drivers penalized for restaurant delays. Accounts flagged after customers claimed food never arrived despite photo proof. Women reporting unsafe drop-offs and being told acceptance rate was part of platform reliability. Parents losing shifts after emergency cancellations. Ethan had built a company that spoke warmly to customers and coldly to everyone carrying food. Still, the more truth he saw, the harder it became to tell Rachel his own. Several times he almost did. Once outside a taco place, when she said she hated people with power who hid facts for someone's own good. Once after she joked that rich people always believed secrecy was romantic if they had nice enough shoes. Once while she packed meals into her car and thanked him for not treating her like a tragedy. Each time Ethan swallowed the truth, and each time, the silence grew heavier. One rainy night, Rachel's old Honda died 2 blocks from her apartment after the last delivery. Ethan helped push it to the curb. He was terrible at pushing cars. He kept trying to coordinate force like a team-building exercise, and Rachel told him if he said leverage one more time, she would let the Honda roll over his foot. They were both soaked by the time they reached her building. Oliver appeared in the lobby wearing dinosaur pajamas and a blanket like a cape, supervised by Mrs. Alvarez from downstairs. His eyes widened when he saw Ethan. "Are you the delivery guy who broke the pizza?" Rachel groaned. Ethan accepted judgment. The cheese made independent choices. Oliver considered this. "You are Mr. Delivery Disaster." The title stuck immediately. Inside the apartment, small and warm and cluttered with school drawings, Ethan sat at the kitchen table while Oliver sorted plastic dinosaurs by financial responsibility. The Triceratops was very responsible. The Velociraptor had credit card debt. The T-Rex apparently was a CEO because he has tiny arms and big opinions. Rachel laughed from the sink. Ethan should have felt insulted. Instead, he felt at home in a place where no one knew his real name. That was the most dangerous part. Then the call came. Rachel was halfway through another shift when Mrs. Alvarez called to say Oliver had a fever and was asking for her. Rachel pulled over, panic moving across her face so fast Ethan felt it before he understood. She opened the app to cancel her remaining deliveries. A warning appeared immediately. High cancellation activity may result in temporary account suspension. Rachel stared at the screen. The delivery bag sat in the back seat, still full. Her son was sick. The app wanted compliance. Ethan's whole body went cold. He could override it. One message to the right engineer. One call to operations. He could unlock her account, send a doctor, arrange a car, cover her lost earnings, fix the entire immediate disaster in less than 5 minutes. His hand went to his phone. Rachel saw it. Something in her snapped. She did not know he was CEO, but she knew the look. A man about to become powerful in her life without permission. She told him she did not need him to explain how he could fix everything. She did not need a strategy. She needed to get home to her child now. Ethan stopped. The phone stayed in his hand for one more second. Then he put it away. He drove. No speech. No secret intervention. No miraculous cancellation override. He drove through rain, through traffic, through the sharp shame of knowing his own app had just treated a sick child like a productivity inconvenience. At Rachel's apartment, Oliver was flushed and miserable on the couch. Ethan sat nearby while Rachel checked his temperature, called the nurse line, found medicine, and moved with the practiced terror of a mother who had done too much alone. Oliver looked at Ethan weakly. "Tell the pizza story," so Ethan told it. He described the cheese landslide, the sprinkler attack, the dog with legal ownership of the driveway. Oliver smiled faintly. Rachel heard it from the kitchen and closed her eyes for 1 second. Not relief, but something near it. Later, when Oliver slept, Rachel thanked him without looking directly at him. Ethan nodded. He did not deserve more. That night, after leaving her apartment, he sat in his car outside SwiftBite headquarters until dawn. He knew what had to change, not a few firings, not a nicer slogan, not a campaign about hardworking drivers, the system itself, but he also knew something else. Every night he waited to tell Rachel the truth. He was building the very betrayal she had already warned him she would not forgive. The emergency meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. on a Friday. Rachel almost did not go. The invitation had appeared in her Swift Bite app the night before. Driver advisory session attendance encouraged. Representatives from operations, driver support, and leadership would be present. Selected drivers would be compensated for their time. That last line made her laugh. A company that penalized people for canceling orders because their children were sick had discovered compensation. Miracles did happen, apparently, but only after legal reviewed the wording. Still, Luis told her to come. If they offer free coffee, drink too, he said. That's how labor movements start. Rachel arrived at SwiftBite headquarters wearing jeans, her driver jacket, and the expression of a woman prepared to be disappointed professionally. Luis sat beside her in the large meeting hall, arms crossed, watching the room like a man who had delivered to too many gated communities to trust automatic doors. Rachel saw Madison Reed near the front, speaking quietly with two executives. She did not see Eli. Then the lights dimmed slightly, a side door opened, and Ethan Cole walked onto the stage. Not Eli in a delivery jacket, not the awkward new driver who had been chased by a dog-ruined pizza, and held Oliver's hand while telling the cheese landslide story. Ethan Coles, CEO of SwiftBite, tailored navy suit, polished shoes, no cap, no delivery bag, no pretending. For a moment Rachel's mind simply refused to connect the two versions of him. Then Luis leaned toward her and muttered, "I knew his shoes were too clean." Rachel could not laugh, her throat had gone tight. Ethan looked out at the room and found her almost immediately. His face changed when he saw her. Not enough for the room to notice. Enough for her to hate that she knew him well enough to see it. He began by saying he had spent the last several weeks delivering under an alias. A murmur moved through the room. Drivers shifted in their chairs. Managers stiffened. Madison's face became still and unreadable. Ethan did not make it charming. He did not turn it into a heroic adventure. He admitted he had entered the work too late, too ignorant, and with assumptions built from dashboards instead of lived experience. Then he played the recording from the executive conference room. The laughter filled the hall, the joke about single mothers, the phrase "tired mom again," the question about whether Rachel's child was sleeping in the car. Rachel stared at the floor. It was strange how humiliation could return even when everyone finally knew it was wrong. Ethan moved on to the data. Late penalties assigned to drivers when restaurants delayed preparation. Customer complaints accepted with no human review. Deactivation warnings triggered by emergency cancellations. Drivers reporting harassment and being told to maintain professionalism. Internal messages referring to them as low-tier contractors. SwiftBite's efficiency, Ethan said, had been built partly on making other people absorb the company's uncertainty. Madison stood. Her voice was calm, controlled, and practiced. She said the system was imperfect but scalable. Drivers were independent contractors. The company could not assume responsibility for every individual circumstance. Customers expected reliability. Investors expected growth. If SwiftBite became too burdened by exceptions, the model would collapse. Rachel felt every word like cold air, individual circumstance. That was what Oliver's fever became in a conference room. Ethan announced immediate action. Termination of the employees who mocked drivers on the recording, suspension of managers involved in dismissing driver abuse reports, and an independent review of Madison's department. Several people clapped. Rachel stood before she could talk herself out of it. The applause died. She did not look at Ethan at first. She looked at the drivers around her. People in worn jackets, tired shoes, careful faces. Then she faced him. If all he did was fire a few people and make a speech, she said, he would have missed the point. Drivers did not need a CEO to go undercover to discover they were human. They had been human the whole time. The problem was that SwiftBite had built a system where their humanity only mattered after the boss accidentally witnessed it. The room went silent. Rachel's voice stayed steady, though her hands shook. She said the company needed a real complaint process, human review before deactivation. Basic accident coverage, a rule allowing drivers to refuse unsafe deliveries without punishment, protection against abusive customers, transparency about how the algorithm assigned penalties, and driver representatives with actual authority, not just smiling faces in a campaign video. Ethan listened. No interruption, no correction, no attempt to rescue the moment from discomfort. When Rachel finished, he nodded once and said those points would be built into the reform plan with driver input and outside oversight. That should have made her feel vindicated. It did not, because under all of it was the private betrayal. Eli had known her stories. Her fear about Oliver, her ex-husband, her shame when the app threatened her account. He had sat in her apartment and let her believe he was simply another tired driver trying to survive the night. Now he was the man who owned the system that had hurt her. The leak came 2 hours later. By afternoon, the headline was everywhere. CEO posed as driver and fell for single mother. The internet turned Rachel into a character before she reached home. Poor hardworking mom. Secret billionaire, workplace fairy tale. People argued about whether she was lucky, manipulative, inspiring, or naive. Nobody asked whether she had agreed to be discussed at all. Derek called before dinner. He had seen the articles. His voice carried the thin anger of a man who felt replaced and wanted to call it concern. He says Oliver did not need to be dragged into a scandal. He said if Rachel was bringing a billionaire into their son's life, maybe custody needed to be revisited. Rachel hung up with her hands shaking. Then she called Ethan. They met outside Swiftbite in the same side alley where the delivery entrance sits beside the dumpsters. It felt appropriate. Ethan apologized before she spoke. Rachel did not soften. She told him he had made her life visible in the worst way because he waited too long to tell the truth. He had turned her exhaustion into evidence, her kindness into discovery, her son into collateral damage. He said he had thought he was protecting the investigation. She said powerful people always had elegant names for withholding the truth. That landed. Ethan looked tired then. Not CEO tired, human tired. He said he could step away from her life completely if that protected her and Oliver. Rachel almost laughed from the pain of it. That was still him deciding. The issue was not whether he stayed or left. The issue was whether he respected her enough to stop making choices on her behalf. Ethan went quiet. Then he said she was right. No dramatic promise followed, no plea, no offer to fix Derek, the press, or the ache in her chest. He told her he would give her whatever distance she chose. The reforms would move forward without using her name. No interviews. No campaign. No Rachel story. She did not forgive him. Not that night. But a week later, when Swiftbite announced the changes without mentioning her, when Luis was elected to the driver council and immediately demanded decent coffee, as a matter of worker dignity, when the app began testing emergency cancellation review with actual humans, Rachel understood something she was not ready to admit out loud. Ethan was not only changing because he wanted her back, he was changing because he had finally heard the people he used to call data. A few months later, Swiftbite was not perfect. Rachel would have been suspicious if it were. Perfect usually meant someone had hidden the complaints under a cleaner rug, but the company was different in ways drivers could actually feel. There was now an emergency support fund for sudden medical bills, car repairs, and family crises. Basic accident coverage was active for drivers on shift. Customer complaints no longer triggered automatic punishment without review. Drivers could refuse unsafe delivery areas without watching their ratings collapse. Most importantly, the driver council had real authority. Luis Martinez became one of its representatives and immediately used his new power to demand free coffee during meetings in the name of justice. Ethan approved the coffee. Luis then complained it was terrible. That, Rachel decided, was democracy. Rachel still delivered sometimes, but not every night until her hands shook on the steering wheel. She kept teaching preschool during the day, and Swiftbite hired her part-time as an advisor for driver family safety programs. Not as the single mom who changed the CEO, but as someone who understood what late shifts, childcare, and unstable income actually did to people. She made sure the first workshop was not called Empowering Driver Families, because as she told the communications team, that sounded like a toothpaste commercial trying to raise children. Oliver was doing better too. He slept more easily now that Rachel was home more nights. He still loved delivery trucks, though he had become suspicious of algorithms after overhearing too much adult conversation. Whenever Ethan came up in conversation, Oliver called him Mr. Former Delivery Disaster, a title Ethan accepted with solemn gratitude. Derek was not magically transformed. Rachel did not trust overnight miracles, especially in men who forgot school performances but remembered their own pride very well. Still, after the court required a clearer parenting schedule and financial support agreement, Derek began showing up more consistently. Not perfectly, but enough that Oliver stopped asking why grown-ups needed reminders to love people. Rachel considered that progress. Ethan changed too. Not in a dramatic movie trailer way. He simply stopped pretending leadership meant surprise disguises and secret tests. He attended driver meetings openly. He sat in folding chairs beside people who did not care about his title and let them tell him when the app still failed them. He learned not to translate every criticism into public relations language. Once, when a driver told him a new update was clearly designed by someone who thinks parking exists everywhere, Ethan started to defend the engineering team. Luis lifted one finger. Ethan stopped. Rachel heard about it later and smiled despite herself. The picnic was held on a rare sunny Seattle afternoon in a public park near the water. Swiftbite called it a driver family appreciation event. Rachel had fought hard against balloons shaped like delivery bags. She won half the battle. The balloons were normal. The cupcakes, unfortunately, still had tiny scooter logos. Oliver loved them anyway. Rachel was helping him balance a paper plate when she saw Ethan walking toward them across the grass. No suit, no expensive watch visible, no assistant, no cameras. He was pushing the same bicycle he had once nearly crashed into a mailbox during his undercover driver days. Hanging from the handlebars was a delivery bag. Rachel crossed her arms. That bag better not contain a grand gesture. Ethan looked offended. I have been legally advised against grand gestures. By whom? Luis, a wise man. Ethan opened the bag. Inside were turkey sandwiches, apple juice for Oliver, and a folded note. Rachel took it. In Ethan's handwriting it read, "No delivery fee, no rescue fee. Just dinner?" She laughed before she meant to. Ethan looked more relieved than any CEO had a right to look over sandwich-based romance. Oliver inspected the bag. "Did you keep the sandwiches level?" "I did." "Good, you have grown." Rachel studied Ethan for a moment. Months ago, he had entered her life pretending to be ordinary while carrying extraordinary power behind his back. He had hurt her with that lie. He had also listened when she refused to let him turn apology into control. That mattered. "So," she said, "if we try dinner, are you planning to build a dashboard for my emotional patterns?" Ethan shook his head. Lewis banned charts in matters of the heart. Strong policy. Also, Oliver said dinosaurs find dashboards emotionally limiting. Oliver nodded seriously, especially Stegosauruses. Rachel looked down at the note again. Dinner sounded simple. That was why it frightened her less. No rescue, no headline. No CEO appearing with a solution large enough to swallow her choices. Just dinner. "All right," she said. "But you do not get to choose a restaurant that serves anything deconstructed." Ethan grimaced. "I've learned sandwiches should maintain structural integrity." Good answer. They sat on the grass together, the three of them, with the city shining softly beyond the trees. Oliver placed plastic dinosaurs into a toy delivery truck and trucked to Ethan on proper prehistoric logistics. The T-Rex was not allowed to drive because, according to Oliver, tiny arms were a safety risk. Ethan accepted the rule without mentioning liability. Rachel watched them and felt something inside her loosen. She had not been rescued from her life. Her life was still hers. She was still a mother, still a teacher, still tired some days. Still strong because she had to be, and sometimes because she chose to be. But now someone was sitting beside her, not taking the wheel, just learning the route. And maybe love had not begun when Ethan revealed he was the CEO. Maybe it began earlier, in a glass office where his own employees mocked a tired mother, and he finally understood that changing one cruel conversation was not enough. He had to change the room that allowed cruelty to sound normal. Rachel looked at Ethan, then at Oliver, then at the delivery bag resting in the grass. For once, nothing needed to be delivered. They were already where they needed to be.